Watch this.
Words matter, which is why when a House lawmaker tried to make some words plainer, others argued it may make matters more confusing and possibly more political. We learned why that idea was scrapped. The annual Boise State Policy Survey asked 1,000 people to give their opinion on a few words relating to Idaho's legislature. Education? Still a big deal to most. Culture wars? Not so much. And for the first time, their outlook on Idaho's politics isn't so rosy. Some words of encouragement for Donald Trump from Idaho's members of Congress. Problem is, some of those words from today don't seem to mesh with their words from years before. Section 17, Article 3 of the Idaho Constitution is a one-sentence explainer of how laws should be written in Idaho. Technical terms to be avoided. It says, every act or joint resolution shall be plainly worded, avoiding as far as practicable the use of technical terms. Well, today, a technicality was called into question when it comes to what to call what's in the womb of a pregnant woman. House Bill 400, given a hearing in the House State Affairs Committee this morning, its intent is to replace the term fetus or fetus and embryo with the term preborn child or child in Idaho's existing code, anywhere it is written. The question before the committee, would this be a practical change, common language, to make Idaho more clear, or would it clear the way for, say, I don't know, legal trouble for a mom being charged with murder for a medically necessary abortion? Joe Paris joins me now, cutting to the chase. This bill did not make it out of the State Affairs Committee today, Joe. So what does the bill sponsor say she was trying to do with this?
This is all about clarity. And to be clear, as Brian touched on at the top here, this did not get out of committee, but it is not dead for the session. So we will keep an eye on this. But Representative Julianne Young, she said this is about clarity. And she is the House sponsor of the legislation, House Bill 400. In her statement of purpose, Young says that the proposed change is policy neutral and does not alter existing statutory definitions. But others disagree with that opinion. And there are a few words in the conversation here that we want to touch on: embryo, unborn child, fetus, and preborn child. So under current Idaho law, unborn child or fetus means an individual organism of the species Homo sapiens from fertilization until live birth. Also defined in a different section of Idaho law, fetus and unborn child, each term means an individual organism of the species Homo sapien from fertilization until live birth. And then in portions of Idaho law titled the Freedom of Conscience for Healthcare Professionals, more definitions. This is the only spot where embryo is defined in Idaho law. And according to Idaho law, it means the developing human life from fertilization until the end of the 8th week of gestation. And in this definition, fetus means the developing human life from the start of the 9th week of gestation until birth. So different definitions in different parts of the law. So Representative Young made the point that Idaho law, it has a lot of crossover terms and definitions, and she says this while explaining the why behind her legislation.
I'm a word girl. I'm an English nerd. And I think it's really important when we communicate that we use language that everybody understands. And so I think there's been some confusion that when we use the term fetus in state statute, it means fetus in the common medical understanding, which is not the case and is evident when you look at the legal definitions for fetus, which don't align with that terminology. So I just think it's good to clear that up and use language that's clear.
So it was a big day today in House State Affairs. The committee hosted public testimony, and during it, a woman named Lynette Jackson, who says she works with an Idaho pregnancy loss ministry, she agrees with Young about the value of simple definitions based on her work experience.
I have never heard until today anybody refer to their child as a fetus or an embryo. I've never heard that. Okay. And when and that includes grandparents and other things. So I don't think that the language is inflammatory or religious. It's just common sense language when defining. So we know what a child is, and then we know what preborn and unborn mean. And when we put those together, we have a very simple, complete definition.
Important context to point out, public testimony today that went on for more than an hour, close to 2. It included a significant amount of people against House Bill 400. Very few testified in favor of it. But those against it expressed concerns about what changing the law could do in pregnancy and abortion conversations.
By changing language from fetus to preborn child, presumably this will lead to mean that the rights of a child will be conferred upon the fetus. This in turn potentially makes anyone who miscarries a potential felon.
If this bill becomes law, would abortion become first-degree murder? Would miscarriages be investigated as a possible murder? Would a woman be prosecuted for fetal harm if she takes drugs or smokes during pregnancy, or if she fails to eat a healthy diet? Even more complicated, fertilized eggs in a laboratory might be considered preborn children. Any facility that stores embryos for later implantation could potentially be open to wrongful death suits if the embryo does not survive.
So a lot to consider, Brian, and I do want to say
A lot of good questions.
A lot of good questions. And another doctor, actually, at the very end of testimony, we didn't have time to show her full testimony. She brought in basically 9 pictures of development of an embryo and said, look, I'm not here to argue for either side. I'm here to answer questions. But again, another big question out there that was talked about was in vitro fertilization. People concerned that if embryos defined a certain way, if preborn child's defined a certain way, you heard the concerns there. So we know that the bill is being held for now, but a chance it comes back after the testimony.
In a different form altogether. We'll see how that testimony goes. All right, thank you very much, Joe. So Planned Parenthood put out a media release today following this hearing titled, "Idaho lawmakers seem to listen to doctor for once," which is an interesting way to title something. But lawmakers listening to the public is something an everyday Idahoan would certainly favor. And we now have a better idea for what, that everyday Idahoan looks like based on the Boise State Public Policy Survey, Andrew.
Yeah, that 9th annual report just came out, Brian and Joe, and that Boise State Public Policy Survey, it details topics that people care most about in the state, which is good timing for some of our viewers who had time to complain and say that their priorities were not getting enough attention. That's shown here from this comment from Ginny, where she says, when will the legislature start tackling big issues all Idahoans care about? Or this one from B&B, most of us really wish that the legislators and the government would stay out of the personal business of us. And do what? Get down to the public business of we? Well, it looks like the state legislature has their work cut out for them. Weeks into the 2024 legislative session, and Idaho lawmakers have made some early headlines.
Issues that get a lot of play on cable news.
It includes the dangers of AI-generated child porn.
When you depict a child by AI that looks real, but it's not, and that's not a crime right now, and it should be.
The regulation of inappropriate library books.
It's for adults. That's not for children. Kids that are 18 and under don't have any reason to access that material.
Changing the word fetus in state law to preborn child.
We just have used these terms in a way that's not clear and consistent.
They're all efforts
I'm not saying they don't matter.
that might fall far from the everyday Idahoan.
They're more interested in, am I going to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month? Is my kid going to a safe school? Is he or she learning?
And Dr. Charles Hunt, he's always gathering answers.
Yeah.
The latest he finds in the annual Boise State Public Policy Survey,
It's like a playground.
where the priorities of the game are set by the players, and Idahoans are consistent in their ask.
These hot button issues, these kind of wedge issues, they come and go, they change, right? I think over time you see people focused more on a lot of these kitchen table issues.
The top 3 legislative priorities are education, jobs in the economy, and housing. Staples, Hunt says, that are largely unchanged and arguably getting worse. For the first time in state history, more Idahoans say the state is heading in a bad direction rather than good.
That's a number that's coming out as the national economy, by most measures is rebounding pretty nicely post-COVID. Idaho's economy is doing well. There's a ton of growth, right?
Hunt says there's a disconnect. While people say we're heading in the wrong direction, a lot of measurables suggest Idaho and the country are both doing well.
On the other hand, I try not to blame voters too much for how they're feeling about a certain situation. Our politics are pretty toxic right now, and we're heading into an election year where most Americans do not seem all that happy about this 2020 rematch between Biden and Trump that we had.
That polarization is seen here, where 4 of the top 5 complaints are about opposing political views or leadership.
It didn't terribly surprise me.
But Hunt adds the important work the people of Idaho want done can and does come with reward if State House leadership is listening.
Legislators' communication with their constituents, they can have some impact on what they were really fighting for. This also would have sort of the effect maybe of sort of increasing this sense of kind of trust and legitimacy in government. that we know is lacking in a lot of our political institutions right now.
The survey also asked about specific topics. There are items that were correctly predicted to be taken up by the legislature this year. So nearly 70% of respondents say that libraries are a non-issue. If you look at our schools, are they too woke? Only about 4% of people think that's an issue. Mandatory minimum sentencing for drug traffickers or alleged drug traffickers, 70% say yes to that. School choice vouchers got majority support too, and about 10% were undecided. So being just under 50% was actually the largest category. The survey dug into the state's current abortion laws too. About 1/3 support those current laws. The majority, though, in favor of expanding exceptions. Difference with that, though, Brian, there's not exactly a communal agreement on what that expansion would look like, how far you would take it. So kind of broke that down in different ways.
What else I found interesting about that is those people that thought that the state was going in the wrong direction versus those that thought it was going the right direction.
Yep.
Those that thought it was going in the right direction have lived here fewer than 10 years. Those that thought it was going the wrong direction politically have been here longer than 10 years.
And a lot of the data suggests that the people that have moved here recently are overwhelmingly Republican, in the sense that a lot of people, political refugees, you could say. Though independents, I do believe, make up a significant portion as well.
Much more than Democrats.
Democrats very much in the minority in that of people moving to the state.
Exactly. Thanks, Andrew. We'll be right back. We are still more than a month out from Idaho's Republican presidential caucus. And the candidates, well, they seem to be dropping like flies. Does that even matter? Since there only seems to be one choice for Idaho's congressional delegation, contrary to what they've said before. I know we don't have to ask what your thoughts are on the presidential race. We're going to get them anyway. But we do like to know what you think about the show. Text us, 208-321-5614. And don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. You know how it works. Keep it clean, keep it concise, and keep it clever, and you'll probably have a good shot of seeing yours at the end of the show. Starting in September, Idaho's GOP began filling out its caucus lineup, with Donald Trump filing first, followed by Ron DeSantis, then Nikki Haley. By early December, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, and Ryan Binkley rounded out the list of 6 to be considered in the 2024 statewide selection process. Each candidate paid $50,000 apiece to fill the state party coffers to run the caucus on the first Saturday in March. And it remained a full field going into the new year, until it wasn't. With Chris Christie dropping from the race on January 10th.
And it's clear to me tonight that there isn't a path.
Vivek Ramaswamy 5 days later.
As of this moment, we are going to suspend this presidential campaign.
And over the weekend, Ron DeSantis.
Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign.
Leaving frontrunner and former President Donald Trump, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, and Texas pastor/businessman Ryan Binkley as the only viable candidates left in Idaho's March 2nd Republican caucus. Okay, so just because those 3 candidates dropped or suspended their campaigns does not mean they won't be a choice on the Idaho Republican caucus ballot. And it wouldn't be the first time Idaho Republicans suggested someone other than the frontrunner, having chosen Ted Cruz over Donald Trump in the 2016 primary. And in his suspension speech, DeSantis endorsed Donald Trump as his choice to be the next president of the United States. So did Ramaswamy. Christie did not, but he did call his 2016 endorsement of the former reality show star a mistake years after. You know who else has endorsed Donald Trump for this presidential primary and election season? That'd be Idaho Senators Jim Risch and Mike Crapo and Congressman Russ Fulcher and Mike Simpson. So let's go through the Gem State endorsement list, beginning with the least surprising. Congressman Fulcher, who back on January 6, 2021, that date ring a bell to anyone? Fulcher tried to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election when he signed the formal objection to those results on that morning before the attempted insurrection at the Capitol began. Congressman Fulcher has not responded to our request for an endorsement explanation, but he did tell the Spokesman Review, America is in crisis. Our border is a problem. The American dream is out of reach for millions while the far left tries to enact draconian gun control laws and a federal takeover of elections. We're at a crossroads, folks. That's what Fulcher wrote. And we're in a battle to save the soul of the greatest nation that the world has ever known. Idahoans know they are not better off now than they were under competent leadership. Congressman Mike Simpson, well, he offered his endorsement of President Trump this morning as well, without offering us some time for an interview, claiming President Biden has demonstrated he is fundamentally out of touch with the American people, encouraging his fellow Idahoans to take part in the upcoming Republican caucus to come together to defeat Biden in November, which is quite the change of tune from nearly 8 years ago. In October 2016, when Congressman Simpson told KTVB, when it came to a choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, he said, it's like we're being offered hemlock or strychnine, and the debate is which one's the least painful. I can't vote for Hillary, wouldn't vote for Hillary, and I don't think Donald Trump is fit to be president. At some point in time, the American people have to say we deserve better than this, and we deserve better candidates than this, people who don't act like children. Simpson called Trump's vulgar comments about women, quote, the final straw. Then once in office, in July of 2017, Congressman Simpson called Trump and his family and his administration a distraction. He believed Trump would learn how to be president, but he didn't see it happening at the time. As for Senator Risch, he is also too busy to speak with us today, but his office did explain his January 13th endorsement of Donald Trump this way, citing Senator Risch's close working relationship with the former president while in office and saying Biden reversed everything Trump did as president. The result? Catastrophic and heartbreaking. Our reputation in the world stage diminished. Our cost of energy and inflation overwhelming, despite gas prices dropping, and so is inflation. Our border overrun, Risch said. How I long for the America of 3 years ago. I realize President Trump greatly aggravates the left and the national media. I believe that is a small price to pay for righting this ship of state, which is so greatly listing. He makes no mention of the 91 felony charges facing the former president, including conspiring to overturn the 2020 election, in which Trump supporters on January 6, 2021, stormed the Capitol and Senator Risch's office. The guy smashing the senator's window, which you're about to see, a rioter who pleaded guilty to jamming a stun gun into a police officer's neck, nearly killing him. Senator Risch did condemn the attack as unpatriotic and un-American in the extreme at the time. But other than that, he has refused to talk about his office getting ransacked or even admitting it happened. There's the window smashing there. Yet he longs for the America of 3 years ago, which would have been about the time when he was cleaning up his office and replacing his windows. Finally, Senator Mike Crapo, who dropped this gem this morning. Today, I add my voice to the growing number of people standing behind Donald Trump because we know he will put America and Americans first. There was a lot of the same we were respected that he said this morning. We were respected abroad, we had good paying jobs, which actually played a lot less than we do now, and we had a stronger border at the time. It's time for a change from the chaos, the difficulties and unrest we have experienced during the Biden administration. I stand with Donald Trump and pledge his help to help him get back to our country's core values and aspirations. Our country's core values. What about the Republican Party's core values or family values? Crapo makes no mention of the jury, which found Trump had sexually abused and defamed writer E. Jean Carroll, giving her $5 million in damages. But of course, there are receipts when Senator Crapo said otherwise of Mr. Trump. Also, back in October of 2016, the senior senator from Idaho said this on Twitter: he could no longer endorse Donald Trump. His repeated actions and comments toward women have been disrespectful, profane, and demeaning. He said this as someone who spent more than 2 decades working on domestic violence prevention. Senator Crapo said that. Trump's locker room talk, he said, Remember, this was right after his lewd grab 'em comments on a bus was made public. Crapo said that was inconsistent with protecting women from abusive, despairing treatment. That's what he said then. But they're all singing the same tune nearly 8 years later. So why did Senator Crapo change his tune and endorse Donald Trump today? We're told he might have some time to speak with us later this week, so we'll just have to ask him when that happens.
This was the second day of temperatures right in the mid to the upper 40s, 47 degrees for the high today. We had that yesterday. We had the rain. If you look at the amounts of rain that we're looking at here throughout the rest of the day, it looks like it's going to be fairly light from this point on. I think it's going to pretty much stop. As we get to Wednesday, here's at 1:30. Now watch, as we've had just, scattered showers, that sort of thing. But look at Boise there. Boom. So for the rest of the valley, there could be a half an inch of rain or more midday Wednesday all the way through Thursday morning. So there could be some good rain showers that are coming our way. For tonight, we have some rain showers, but they're pretty much decreasing to the west end of the valley. Likely they'll continue to do that. Up here in the mountains, there's still a few scattered showers. Watch for some freezing rain. That's a possibility for late tonight, early tomorrow morning. So as you look at the 7-day forecast, tomorrow's temperature about 40, could be up to about 43, 44. Wednesday, this is when the rain begins, so that keeps the temperature down, as you see, into Thursday, with a high temperature right around 40 degrees there. Then we're still about 40. Then Saturday and Sunday, we could be drying up with just a few scattered showers around. Right now, we have some storms that are out in the Pacific that we're kind of watching closely to see what happens. Right now, it appears most of our models are sending them to the north, and if that happens, we're going to get more of that southwesterly flow, and we're going to see those temperatures not only in the mid-40s. If that happens, first part of next week, we could be seeing some temperatures around 50, 51 degrees.
All right, got a lot of comments rolling in today. Can't keep up with all of them, but I'll try to make a comment about a couple of these. This one, think of your breakfast eggs as pre-hatched chickens. Well, that's assuming there's no rooster in the hen house and it hasn't been fertilized, but I can see where you're going with that one. We got a couple of those kind of comments today about the preborn versus embryo versus fetus in Idaho law. Idaho needs to go to a biennial legislature and only meet in odd years. And odd would be appropriate, says Kelly. That's a good one. The term political refugee is extremely offensive. It discounts the real struggle of real refugees, says Lori. Heard that a couple times as well. This one from Craig. It's politics, Brian. You're allowed to change your opinion when there's fewer choices of candidates than before, and a lot of time has passed. I'll give you that. Yes, you are allowed to change your opinion on a political candidate, but it seems to me that there are some things that have changed and some things that have not from 8 years ago. One thing that has changed, and the things that I challenge any of you to point out, the bias or the non-factual information that we share with this, there are 91 felony indictments against the former president. He has been found to have sexually abused a woman in a store in New York City. And these are the facts, but yet some people who took offense to that 8 years ago don't seem to do that these days. Talking about our legislature or our delegation to Washington these days.